Let me tell you about a conversation I had at a backyard cookout a few years ago. There was a man there, a retired pipe fitter who spent 30 years working in the heat and the cold, the kind of man who showed up early and left late every single day of his working life. We got to talking about retirement, and he told me something that challenged everything I believed about Social Security. He told me that he claimed Social Security at 62 and that his financial advisor told him he was throwing money away. When I asked him how it worked out, he leaned back in his chair and said, "I've got $84,000 in an investment account that my buddies who waited don't have, and my wife and I drove the Pacific Coast Highway the summer I turned 63, while I could still enjoy every mile of it." Now, I'm not here to tell you that man was right or wrong. That's not what this is about. What I am here to tell you is that the advice most Americans get about when to claim Social Security, advice that gets repeated over and over by financial planners, by television talking heads, by well-meaning family members, that advice is often incomplete. And for a lot of people, it may actually be costing them money. So today we're going to sit down together and work through this properly. No confusing jargon, no Wall Street double talk, just plain honest math and common sense, the kind your grandfather would have appreciated. Let's figure out what the actual best age to start claiming Social Security is. Is it 62, 67, or 70? I'll walk you through who benefits from each one, what the numbers actually look like, and what the so-called experts aren't telling you. And by the end of this video, you're going to have a real framework, not a one-size-fits-all rule, but an actual thinking process you can apply to your own life and your own situation. First, let me make sure we're all starting from the same place, because Social Security can get confusing fast, and I don't want to lose anybody early on. Social Security is a federal program that pays you a monthly check in retirement based on how much you earned and paid into the system over your working life. You've been paying into it your whole career, every paycheck. That money came out before you ever saw it. So this isn't a handout. This is your money, money you earned. And the question we're answering today is simply, when is the smartest time to start collecting it? Now, the government gives you a window. You can start as early as age 62. You can wait as late as age 70. And somewhere in the middle is what they call your full retirement age, the age at which you receive your full, unreduced benefit. For most people watching this video right now, anyone born in 1960 or later, that full retirement age is 67. If you were born between 1955 and 1959, your full retirement age is somewhere between 66 and 67, depending on your exact birth year. But for simplicity, we're going to use 67 as our baseline today, because that's where most of the country is headed. So you've got three main choices. Claim early at 62 and get a smaller check for more years. Claim at your full retirement age of 67 and get your full benefit. Or delay until 70 and get a bigger check for fewer years. That's the basic setup. Now let's talk about what those numbers actually look like in real dollars. Let's use a straightforward example. Say your full Social Security benefit, the amount you'd receive if you claimed right at age 67, is $2,000 a month. That's a round number, easy to work with, and it's close to what a lot of middle-income Americans receive. If you claim at 62, you don't get $2,000. You get permanently reduced. The reduction is roughly 30% for someone whose full retirement age is 67. So instead of $2,000, you're looking at about $1,400 a month. If you wait until 70, your benefit grows by about 8% for every year you delay past your full retirement age. That's 3 extra years of growth, which adds up to roughly a 24% bonus on top of your full amount. So instead of $2,000, you'd receive about $2,480 a month. Now on paper, that bigger check at 70 looks awfully attractive, and that's exactly what most financial advisors will point to. They'll show you that $2,480 number and say, "See? Wait, it's worth it." But here's what they don't always show you right alongside that number: the break-even math. Break-even is a simple concept. It's the age at which the total dollars you've collected by waiting finally surpasses the total dollars you would have collected by claiming early. Let me walk you through it slowly, because this is the heart of the whole conversation. If you claim at 62 instead of waiting until 67, you start collecting $1,400 a month, 5 full years before the person who waits. That's 60 months of payments before the age 67 claimer gets a single dime. At $1,400 a month, that's $84,000 you've collected before the other person even starts. Now, the person who waited until 67 gets $600 more per month than you. $2,000 versus your $1,400. So they're catching up at $600 a month. You divide that $84,000 head start by $600 a month, and it takes them roughly 140 months, that's about 11 and a half years, to catch up to you. Add that to age 67 and the break-even point lands somewhere around age 78 to 79. What that means is this. If you live past 78 or 79, the person who waited until 67 eventually comes out ahead in total dollars collected. If you don't reach that age, the early claimer wins. Now let's look at waiting until 70 versus claiming at 62. The break-even there pushes out to around age 80 or 81. And if you're comparing claiming at 67 versus waiting until 70, the break-even is somewhere around 82 or 83. So the question you have to ask yourself, honestly without flinching, is this: how long do you expect to live? And I know that's not a comfortable question. Nobody likes to sit down and think about their own mortality over a cup of coffee. But this is your money, and this decision deserves an honest answer. Now let's talk about what the actual survival numbers look like, because this is where the conventional wisdom starts to crack. According to Social Security's own mortality data, a 62-year-old American man has roughly a 53% chance of surviving to age 84. That sounds pretty good until you flip it around. It means about 47% of men do not make it to 84, nearly half. And when you look at the break-even for claiming at 62 versus waiting until 70, which is around age 80 to 81, roughly 1 in 3 men don't even make it that far. Now for women, the numbers are better. Women tend to live longer on average. About 3 out of 4 women make it past 78, and roughly 2/3 reach 84. So for women, the math on delaying is somewhat more favorable. And we'll talk more about that when we get to married couples. But here's the thing that really matters, and this is something the financial industry almost never talks about. Life expectancy is not the same for everyone. It's not evenly distributed across the population. Where you fall on that spectrum depends enormously on your income, your education, your occupation, and your health history. Researchers at the Brookings Institution found a gap of nearly 13 years in life expectancy between American men in the highest income group and those in the lowest income group. 13 years. That is an enormous difference, and it completely changes the math on Social Security claiming. Think about who is most likely to be watching a video like this one. Working-class Americans. People who spent their careers doing physical labor, construction, manufacturing, farming, trucking, plumbing, electrical work. People whose bodies have taken a beating over 30 or 40 years. People who may have smoked. People managing diabetes, heart disease, high blood pressure. People who never had the luxury of a desk job with full health benefits. These are often the very people who are told to wait until 70. And these are often the very people who are statistically least likely to live long enough to make that waiting pay off. The wait until 70 rule was essentially designed for someone with the health profile and life expectancy of an upper middle class, college-educated professional who spent their career behind a desk. And there's nothing wrong with that person. But that's not most of America. Now I want to talk about something that most financial advisors either overlook or deliberately avoid bringing up, and that is the possibility of investing your early Social Security checks. Here's the scenario. You're 62 years old. You got a paid-off house, a little money in savings, and your spouse is still working. You don't actually need your Social Security check to pay the electric bill or put food on the table. You could live without it for a few more years. Most advisors in that situation will say, "Great, then wait until 70. You don't need it now, so let it grow." But there's another option they often don't present. What if you claim at 62 and invest every single check? Let's run those numbers. You claim at 62, collecting $1,400 a month. You don't spend it. You put it into a simple, low-cost index fund, the kind that tracks the broad stock market. Over the 5 years between age 62 and age 67, you've contributed $84,000. Now, if that money earns a 5% real return, meaning 5% above inflation, here's what happens. By age 67, that account has grown to roughly $96,000. By age 70, it's around $115,000. And by age 80, it's approaching $200,000. That changes the break-even math dramatically. When you factor in investment returns on early checks, the break-even between claiming at 62 and waiting until 70 shifts from around age 80 or 81 out to roughly age 84 or 85 at a 5% return. At a 6% return, the break-even pushes past 87, and at a 7% return, which is not unreasonable for a long-term stock market investor, the person who waited until 70 may never catch up within a normal human lifespan. Now, I want to be straight with you here. This strategy only works if you actually have the discipline to invest those checks and leave them alone. If you claim at 62 and spend the money on a new truck and a base boat, the math doesn't work. This is for people who genuinely don't need the income and can treat those early checks as an investment contribution. But for those people, and there are more of them than you might think, early claiming combined with disciplined investing is a genuinely powerful strategy that most financial advisors will never put on the table in front of you. And speaking of what financial advisors put on the table, I want to say something here that might ruffle a few feathers, but I think it needs to be said. When a financial advisor manages your money, they typically charge a fee based on how much money they're managing for you. It's usually somewhere around 1% of your total account value per year. That's how most of them get paid. Now think about what happens when you delay Social Security until 70. During those years between 62 and 70, you're not collecting Social Security. So where is your living money coming from? It's coming out of your retirement accounts, your 401k, your IRA, your savings, the accounts your advisor manages, the accounts he charges a fee on. If you claim Social Security early, you're drawing less from those managed accounts, which means your advisor's fee goes down. I'm not saying every financial advisor is giving you bad advice on purpose. Most of them are decent people who genuinely believe what they're telling you. But I am saying that the incentive structure of the financial advisory industry happens to line up very neatly with the advice to delay Social Security as long as possible. And that's worth knowing when you're sitting across the desk from someone telling you to wait until 70. Always ask yourself, who benefits from the advice I'm being given? Now I want to talk about something that doesn't get nearly enough attention in these conversations, and that is the risk to Social Security itself. This is not fear-mongering. These are official numbers from official government sources. And if you're making a decision about when to claim Social Security, you need to have this information. The Social Security trustees, the people who actually run the program and report on its finances every year, released a report projecting that the trust fund that pays retirement benefits could be depleted as early as 2033. That's not far away. That's 8 years from now. Now, what happens if that trust fund runs dry? The program doesn't disappear. Social Security would still collect payroll taxes from working Americans, and those taxes would still fund a portion of benefits. But according to the trustees' own projections, payroll taxes alone would only cover about 77% of scheduled benefits. That means a potential across-the-board cut of roughly 23%. The Congressional Budget Office, another official government source, has projected the depletion could come as early as 2032, with a possible benefit cut of around 28% starting in 2033. And there are researchers who believe that recent changes to tax law may have actually pulled that timeline forward even further by reducing the amount of tax revenue flowing into Social Security. Let me put some real dollar figures on this. If you're expecting a maximum Social Security check of around $2,976 a month at age 70, and a 28% cut happens, that check could drop to about $2,143 a month. For a typical single-earner couple, that could mean losing around $13,800 a year in expected income. For a higher-income couple, the loss could be closer to $24,400 a year. Now, will Congress fix this before it happens? Maybe. Probably, in some form. Congress has stepped in before. But they may fix it by raising the retirement age, reducing cost of living adjustments, or means testing benefits for higher earners. Any of those changes could affect you. The point is this: if you delay claiming until 70, you are making a bet that Congress will fully protect your benefits before the trust fund runs short. That may be a bet that pays off, but it is a bet, and you should know you're making it. If you claim earlier, you start collecting before the funding crisis fully arrives. You lock in years of payments at the current benefit levels. That's not a perfect solution either, but it's a factor that belongs in your decision. Now I want to talk about something that is specifically important for married couples, because the claiming strategy for a married couple is fundamentally different from the strategy for a single person. And most advisors only tell you half the story. Here's what a lot of advisors will tell a married couple: both of you should wait until 70. The reason they give is survivor benefits. Let me explain what a survivor benefit is, because it's important. When one spouse passes away, the surviving spouse doesn't keep both Social Security checks. They keep the larger of the two. So if the husband was collecting $2,480 a month, and the wife was collecting $1,400 a month, and the husband passes away first, the wife steps up to the $2,480 check and loses her own smaller benefit. That's a real and meaningful protection, and it's a legitimate reason for the higher-earning spouse to delay. A larger benefit at 70 means a larger survivor benefit for the spouse who lives longer. But here's what most advisors don't tell you. It doesn't necessarily make sense for both spouses to wait. There's a strategy called asymmetric claiming. It works like this. The lower-earning spouse claims early, at 62 or 63. The higher-earning spouse delays until 70. The household gets income coming in during those early retirement years. And the survivor benefit is still protected, because it's based on the higher earner's delayed benefit. Let me give you a real example. Say the wife's full retirement benefit is $900 a month. If she claims at 62, she gets about $630 a month. Over 5 years, that's $37,800 coming into the household that you wouldn't have had otherwise. Meanwhile, the husband's full retirement benefit is $2,800 a month. He waits until 70, and his benefit grows to around $3,472 a month. If he passes away first, she steps up to that $3,472 survivor benefit. The household got $37,800 in early income. The survivor protection is still fully intact, and the lower-earning spouse's reduced benefit doesn't affect the survivor benefit at all because the survivor benefit is based entirely on the higher earner's record. That is a strategy that works for a lot of married couples, and it's one that far too few people ever hear about. There's another angle here, too. When the lower-earning spouse claims early and brings in some income, it can give the higher-earning spouse the financial breathing room to keep working a little longer, maybe 1 or 2 more years. And one extra year of high earnings can actually be more valuable than an additional year of delayed retirement credits, depending on your situation. Now, I want to step away from the spreadsheets for a moment and talk about something that no financial advisor has a formula for. There's a difference between how long you live and how long you live well. Doctors sometimes call it your health span, the years during which you are genuinely healthy, mobile, active, and able to do the things you love. And for most Americans, that health span ends roughly a decade before their life does. The years between 62 and 72, those are what retirement planners sometimes call the go-go years. You can still travel. You can still get down on the floor and play with your grandkids. You can still hike, fish, garden, drive across the country, visit old friends. Do the things you always said you'd do when you finally had the time. After that comes what some people call the slow-go years. You're still getting around, but maybe not as far or as fast. And eventually, for many people, comes the no-go years, when health challenges make the big adventures harder or impossible. Now here's the question I want you to sit with for a minute. If you delay Social Security until 70, you are shifting money away from your go-go years and into your slow-go and no-go years. You're giving up supplemental income during the decade when you are most physically capable of enjoying it, in exchange for a larger check during the years when your discretionary spending, the money you spend on experiences and enjoyment, tends to naturally decline anyway. I've talked to a lot of retirees over the years, and I have never once heard a man on his deathbed say he wished he'd had a bigger monthly check at 82. But I have heard plenty of people say they wished they'd taken that trip, visited that place, spent that time with the people they loved while everyone was still healthy enough to enjoy it. There is no break-even chart for a missed experience. There is no spreadsheet that captures the value of a road trip with your wife while you can still drive, or a fishing trip with your son while your back still lets you cast a line. I'm not saying throw the math out the window. The math matters, but the math is not the whole picture, and any advisor who only shows you the math is only showing you part of the truth. Now, I've spent a good portion of this video making the case for why early claiming deserves more consideration than it gets. But I want to be fair, because this is a real decision with real consequences, and there are absolutely situations where waiting makes sense. If you are in genuinely excellent health at 62, not just feeling pretty good, but actually excellent health, with clean blood work, no chronic conditions, and a family history of longevity, then the math on delaying gets more favorable for you. If your parents and grandparents routinely lived into their late 80s and 90s, and you've taken care of yourself, there's a reasonable case that you'll live well past the break-even age. In that case, the bigger check at 70 may well be worth the wait. If you have very little in retirement savings but you're still healthy enough to keep working comfortably, delaying Social Security while you continue earning and saving can make a lot of sense. You're adding to your nest egg and letting your benefit grow at the same time. If you are the higher earner in a married couple, and your spouse is significantly younger than you, your survivor benefit becomes especially important. Delaying until 70 could mean decades of higher income for a surviving spouse who outlives you by many years. And if you're honest with yourself, and you really know, that you would spend those early Social Security checks rather than invest them, then delaying can actually act as a form of forced savings. A bigger check later that you can't touch yet is sometimes better than a smaller check now that disappears before the end of the month. There is no shame in any of that. The right answer depends on your life, your health, your family, and your finances, not on a rule that some financial pundit invented for a television segment. Before I give you the decision framework I promised at the start of this video, I want to take a moment to talk about something that I think is genuinely important, and it connects directly to why so many Americans struggle with decisions like this one. Most of us were never taught how money actually works. We went to school. We learned history and algebra and how to diagram a sentence, but nobody sat us down and explained compound interest. Nobody walked us through how debt accumulates. Nobody showed us how a small difference in an interest rate can cost you tens of thousands of dollars over a lifetime. Nobody explained what a tax-advantaged retirement account actually does for you, or how your credit score is calculated, or why the financial decisions you make in your 30s and 40s echo all the way into your retirement. And so we made decisions by default. We carried car payments because everyone does. We bought the biggest house we could qualify for. We used credit cards for points without fully understanding what we were paying in interest. We invested in whatever our coworker was excited about. We trusted advisors who gave us generic advice without ever really understanding our specific situation. And those defaults compound. A poor financial decision at 35 doesn't just cost you money at 35. It costs you the growth that money would have generated for the next 30 years. And by the time you're sitting at 62 trying to figure out when to claim Social Security, you're dealing with the accumulated result of every financial decision, good and bad, that came before it. The Social Security claiming decision is really the final chapter of a much longer financial story. And the people who navigate it best are the ones who understood the earlier chapters: saving, spending, debt, investing, taxes, and the basic mechanics of how money moves through a life. That's why I'd encourage you, after you finish this video, to keep learning. Keep asking questions. Keep pushing back on advice that doesn't feel right for your specific situation. The financial industry profits from your confusion. Your job is to refuse to stay confused. Now, I also want to mention something that ties directly into protecting your retirement, and that's what you do with the money you have saved. A lot of people in or near retirement are starting to ask a question that would have seemed unusual 20 years ago. Is my money actually safe? And I think that's a fair question. We've watched inflation eat into purchasing power. We've watched the stock market swing wildly. We've watched the national debt climb to levels that would have been unimaginable a generation ago. And we've watched Washington make promises about Social Security that may or may not be kept. One option that a growing number of American retirees are looking at is a gold IRA. Now, a gold IRA is simply an individual retirement account, the same kind of tax-advantaged account you may already be familiar with. But instead of holding stocks and bonds, it holds physical gold or other precious metals. Gold has been a store of value for thousands of years. It doesn't go bankrupt and it doesn't get bailed out. It doesn't depend on a government promise. And historically, it has tended to hold its value, or increase in value, during periods of inflation, economic uncertainty, and dollar weakness. The exact conditions, by the way, that tend to accompany Social Security funding crises. I'm not saying put everything into gold. Diversification is still important. But for people who are concerned about inflation, about the stability of the dollar, and about the long-term reliability of government programs, having a portion of your retirement savings in physical precious metals is something worth understanding. In the description box below this video, I left a free gold IRA guide that walks you through exactly how this works, what a gold IRA is, how to set one up, what the tax implications are, and whether it might make sense for your situation. There's no obligation and no pressure at all, so feel free to check it out after watching this video. Now let's bring this all together. I promised you a decision framework, and here it is. Step 1. Start with an honest health assessment. Not an optimistic one, an honest one. Look at your current health, your chronic conditions, your medications, your weight, your resting heart rate, whether you smoke or have smoked, your family history. How long did your father live? Your grandfather? Your mother? Your grandmothers? If the men in your family tend to die in their late 60s and early 70s, that is information. Use it. Step 2. Look at your retirement assets. Do you have a 401k, an IRA, savings, a pension? If you delay Social Security, where will your living expenses come from during those extra years? Will you be drawing down your retirement accounts faster? Will that leave you with less later? Run those numbers. Step 3. Be honest about what you would do with early Social Security checks. Would you invest them, or would they disappear into everyday spending? If you'd invest them, early claiming becomes significantly more attractive mathematically. If you'd spend them, the calculus changes. Step 4. If you're married, run the survivor benefit math. Think about who is likely to live longer. Think about the age gap between you and your spouse. Consider asymmetric claiming. The lower earner claims early, the higher earner delays. Make sure you understand how survivor benefits work before you make any decision. Step 5. Factor in Social Security's funding risk. It may not affect you. Congress may fix it, but it may affect you, and you should include it in your thinking rather than pretending it doesn't exist. Step 6. Think about the value of money in your 60s versus your 80s. Think about your health span, not just your lifespan. Think about what you want to do in retirement and when you want to do it. Put a real value on your go-go years. And step 7. Consider diversifying your retirement savings with assets that don't depend on government promises or stock market performance. That's where something like a gold IRA may be worth exploring. Now let me close with a story about Raymond. Raymond was 62 years old, working as a warehouse supervisor outside of Pittsburgh. His wife had retired the year before on a modest teacher's pension, enough to cover the basics, but not much more. A financial planner told Raymond to wait until 70, said it was the smart move, said the math was clear. Raymond went home and thought about it for a few weeks. He thought about his father, who had a heart attack at 71 and spent his last 2 years in a care facility. He thought about his uncle, who retired at 65 and was gone by 69. He thought about his own health. A little high blood pressure, a few extra pounds, a back that had been complaining since his late 40s from years of physical work. He thought about his wife, who had always wanted to see the national parks, all of them: Yellowstone, the Grand Canyon, the Smoky Mountains, Acadia up in Maine. She had a list on the refrigerator that she'd been adding to for 20 years. Raymond claimed Social Security at 62. He and his wife spent the next 3 summers working through that list on the refrigerator. They saw the geysers at Yellowstone. They stood on the rim of the Grand Canyon at sunrise. They drove through the Smokies in October when the leaves were turning. He also took a portion of every check and put it into a simple index fund. He didn't touch it, just let it grow. Now, if Raymond lives to 87, he may end up collecting fewer total dollars than if he had waited until 70. The math might not work out perfectly in his favor on paper, but if he doesn't live to 87, and based on his health profile and family history, that's a real possibility. He will have collected substantially more. And either way, he and his wife got to stand on the rim of the Grand Canyon together while they were still healthy enough to make the drive. The most important math isn't always the math on an advisor's spreadsheet. Sometimes the most important math is the math of money, and health, and time, and the things you do with the years you actually have. That's what this decision is really about.